then we'll get to the...
Okay, so if you've ever heard me talking about anything, it all comes back to combining all of these things that I've been talking about. Step 10, getting block watch going, being aware of what's going on around you, knowing how to use the 911 emergency response system. All of these things are connected, and this is a perfect example of how all of those things can come together. So the things that are in your mailbox are oftentimes of value, and oftentimes they have information on them. And that information can be of value depending on who gets the information. So I think that'll be something that the post office will be talking about. So I'll leave that alone for now. So there are, when you realize that you have been, the mail has been stolen, there's two major groupings of this type of a call. One is you come home and you realize that it's gone, and there's really no expectation that you believe that we're going to be able to figure out who it was. You didn't see it happen. Maybe you talked to your neighbors and nobody saw anything. If that's where you're at, then you can just call the information that the postal inspector is going to give you and report it directly to them. That's one possibility. The other possibility is if you believe that there is information that an officer with boots on the ground might be able to come in and tie this into a particular person, or maybe take that piece of information and tie it into another incident, that we can then group this all together and catch somebody. If you think there's any likelihood of gathering any information, then you're going to want to call us. And we will dispatch an officer in order to gather the information and try to tie it together. Obviously, you're going to get, the more information you have, the better your response is going to be. What I mean is, if there's somebody actively taking mail out of your mailbox, and you call it in at that point, then that's going to be a much higher priority call than if you say, I think that my neighbor 3 houses down keeps stealing my mail, but I have no idea, I've never seen them do it, but I think that's who's taking it. So that's going to be a different type of priority. The way we prioritize the calls, and I've said this many times, but the people here who have not heard about it. So we prioritize calls from a 1 up to an 8. I've never seen a 7 or an 8. So pretty much 1 to a 6. A 1 means that somebody's trying to shoot somebody, and somebody's in grave danger, and we need to get there as soon as possible. 1 and a 2, generally, we're going to be going lights and sirens to get there as quickly as possible. 3, we're probably going to be going without the lights, but we'll probably turn our lights on to get through traffic signs or lights and stuff like that. So we're still trying to get there quickly, but not in any sort of dangerous way. So if you have mail theft and you know that the mail has been taken, it's probably going to be in the 5 to 6 range if there's no information. So understanding that, that's how, if there's a 1 in the queue and there's a 5 in the queue, obviously we're going to take the 1 first. If there's 4 5s in the queue and they've been waiting for 10 minutes and a 1 pops up, those 5s are going to keep waiting. So when you give us the information, you give us very, very little information, then that's how it gets prioritized.
Are these all not routine calls, or would then later, like 5 and 6, you'd use the precinct number because it's not an urgent?
Okay. If you expect to get a police officer to respond, you'll never call the precinct. We can't dispatch from the precinct here. So it's always going to be either 911 or the non-emergency number, which is 625-5011. And both of those end up going into the same queue and get prioritized in exactly the same way. So when I put my call on the screen in the car, I don't know the difference between the non-emergency or it looks exactly the same to me. Okay. So where we're at this point is the more accurately you can describe the situation, the more accurately we're going to prioritize that. Okay, so I'm not saying to escalate what we're perceiving in order to get a quicker response. I'm saying that it needs to be accurately described so that we can get there. If you overdo it, then and it pops up to a 3, then it may actually hinder another call where somebody does actually need us to get there quickly. So it's a very discourteous, I think at the very least, to try to escalate the call. So the way that this works for us, the investigation, the original investigation, is something that SPD can handle. But regardless of what comes out of this, even if we arrest somebody, it goes to the final say in what's happening goes to the postal inspector. If it's a theft, then we can deal with it and then we'll be able to hash out the particulars a little bit more. But if it's a theft, then we'll deal with it. But if it's just the items that are being taken, I believe it's the value of the item, value of the paper. Is that correct?
Or financial losses as a result of that information used for.
But we won't know that until well after the, when we get there, it's always that they've taken some pieces of paper, they've taken something of a monetary value. So the theft, we handle, but in the end, the report goes to the postal inspectors. So if you have a case where you think that there's a little bit of information and an officer will come out and take the report, it's going to go to them anyhow. So if the officers know that information, then we can then tie it to other cases that we've been working with.
Drugs handled differently than a
As far as getting
PLRS
literacy.
is mailed to us, and they're always referring. I think they know that. So I didn't know if RSs get handled differently.
I don't know how that works as far as, I think as far as on our side of things, if we catch them with that, then they're in possession of the drugs that don't belong to them, which is crime. And then it's also the value of the item for the theft. So.
For us, it's handled just like
So did they capture somebody that had the drugs on them? Okay, so that's what I mean. If we actually were to capture them and they had the drugs on them, then it would be possession as well as
Additional crime.
right. So okay, so the best things for you guys to pay attention to? Let's kind of go through the things that I've talked about already. SEPTED. Some of the things we talked about in SEPTED is natural surveillance, setting up good sight lines. People should be able to see your mailboxes. And you should, if something like this is going on in the neighborhood, people should know that it's going on and know that they need to pay attention. They need to use each other as resources to pay attention to what kind of activity is going on around your mailboxes. We talked last month about video surveillance. Perfectly acceptable. What I don't recommend is if you get video surveillance, don't recommend passing it around to the neighbors saying this is the criminal who's stealing our mail. I recommend calling the police, turning it in, and letting it be investigated. People are wrong on occasion, and that can cause trouble. So, okay, so we've got the SEPTED issue, block watching. This is all it's all tied into how we communicate to each other. So if you guys know that something's going on, and you guys communicate what's going on, and people know that this particular person is going to be paying attention in this time. There's another person that may be paying attention in the evening, and you guys have that email set up where you guys can all talk about what you've seen that day. It all works together. So we're at when you're describing. So how to use the 911 system. When you call 911, the system is not designed for them to have a conversation with you. It's designed for them to fill out a list. And they've got a list of information that they need to dispatch officers as efficiently as possible. So when you call, and they're going to say, 911, what's your emergency? Or 911, what are you reporting? And you're going to say, I'm reporting mail theft. And just wait. They're going to be asking you questions. You answer their questions. You calm and just wait. A big part of the way we communicate a story, we try to tell the backstory so people understand the story. And communicating in a conversation doesn't work in 911 effectively. So understand that your job is to help them fill out that list. Once they fill out that list to the point where they might say, well, is there anything else? That's going to be your time to tell them the story. If they got what they need, they might say, okay, that's all I need. Okay, thank you very much, officers, we'll be on the way. So how to use the 911 emergency phone system, that's a huge part of it. How to describe people, how to describe vehicles. For this type of a thing, if you can get a license plate, and you can get a color of the vehicle and maybe the type of vehicle. If you were to say the license plate's ABC123 and it's a green 4-wheeler, then what we can do is we can run that vehicle and then we just verify that your plate is right by knowing, because when we run it we can see that it's a green 4-wheeler. So we're just verifying you've got the plate right. So for you to add that little bit of extra information, the plate is by far more important than the description of the vehicle. But we confirm it using the description of the vehicle. Does that make sense? Kind of what I'm getting at here? Okay. So SEPTA is involved. So block watch is involved. So how to use the emergency system is involved. Knowing how to describe people, knowing how to be aware of what's going on in your neighborhood. It's all tied together. So when we love it when we get a call and it says, this guy, there was a guy just taking the mail out of all of my neighbors' boxes. His license plate is this. It's a blue car, and the guy is a white guy in his 30s with hair down to the back of his back. That's perfect, because when I get in the area, number one, I've got a license plate, so I can have an officer go straight to his house if the car's not stolen. If the car's stolen, even better. Okay. So, I mean, for me. So when we get to that point, we've got officers get in the area. If I see the vehicle, I know I've got the vehicle. Okay. So license plates are huge for us. Okay. And the investigation side of it is we tend to deal with things as theft or as trespass or as far as it being mail theft in particular, there isn't we have a classification that we put on the report just so that it gets sent to the postal inspector. But for us, it's theft because they've stolen your mail without permission. We'll talk about. I think we'll probably talk about when it's federally and when it's not a federal offense to take mail. I've heard some discrepancies there. And I quite honestly, I'm not exactly sure when it is what. But for me, I just try to catch it and then let the attorneys hash it all out at the end. Any questions about kind of? It's a really big rundown, but again, it's all of these things are tied together. It's how you can affect it as a community, are by affecting all those different pieces.
It's not really a question, it's kind of just answering what you were saying. Our block had a lot of problems with packages being stolen, and we have a previous detective that's on our block. We're in the process of getting a camera that records every license plate that goes down our block. And right now we have a camera that catches every car that goes down our street. And we actually have caught on footage them breaking into the truck in front of the camera, and we're able to give it to the police. It got 110% exactly what that car was, and they found them off of just their truck picture. And we have our alley also has video footage in the back. And they went into a backyard, the gate was locked, and got right in front of the camera, was stealing stuff, and it was put on Washington's Most Wanted, and the guy thought he was being watched, so he turned himself in, because he saw himself stealing the stuff. And they're just the $100 your hunting cameras. We just put it in our window facing the street, and the police have said that's the best footage they could have had, and it's just $100 cameras. And our mail fraud is almost stopped. The packages will be stolen, opened, a week later they bring them, throw them back in their yard. There's the stuff they stole, they didn't even take it, they brought it back. So I mean, ours is almost completely stopped now.
So one of the things that is important to note is that an officer And you look at this area here. This is my area, all this area here. So if I am in this neighborhood and somebody asks me what's suspicious in that neighborhood, or who is suspicious in that neighborhood, I think about drugs. I think about things that affect them that I can actually physically look at them and say, well, they are probably involved in this sort of a drug or whatever. But really, I can't tell, like you can, that person shouldn't have his hands in that mailbox. Because I don't know those people. But you know who belongs to what mailbox. And especially the fact that you're there. I may be here when it's happening there. And the fact that you guys have all the eyes and you guys can contact us and tell us what's suspicious is the beautiful thing about this system. I went down and talked with the Westwood Village post office down at Westwood Village and talked with all of the mail carriers before their shift. And I just asked them, what can we do to help you guys out? And what can we do to make, number one, make you safer, and number two, make it less likely that mail's going to get stolen. And they said there was two main things that they talked about. One is, they said, when you know you got mail, get it. Take it out of your mailbox. Because it happens quite often that these guys are coming around at 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and the mail's been in there for 12 hours already. So if there's mail in your mailbox, take it out. Because they got nothing to take, they got nothing to take. The other thing is, if you can get a lock in the mailbox, one of the carriers said that the ones that have a flat key, like a normal house key, are not as sturdy as the ones that have the round key. I don't know the validity of that. It makes sense to me, but you can look at it yourself and pay attention to that. They like the idea of an entire neighborhood getting one of the big community mailboxes, and that's something that you guys can go in with as a community. And I don't know how it gets funded. I'm assuming that the community pays for it, and there are some stipulations to exactly how it gets installed. But those are really the two big things. Is they want, if you can lock your mailbox and get a community mailbox, great idea. Second is go get your mail if it's out. Okay, any other questions?
All right, thank you, John. And let's John will stay so we can ask him questions at the end, but I want to let these guys get started with their presentation. And if you guys can just kind of introduce yourselves and what your roles are, that's easier than we can go through it.
Jesus, I'll walk in here. Well, first off, my name is Matt Mintool. I've been with the Inspection Service not even a year. Came out here to Seattle in July. Initially as a police officer in the state of Georgia. I started policing in 1997 and went into this job probably about 8 years ago. Went through the very slow hiring process. Finally got selected and moved me out here to Seattle. During all the time that I was policing in Georgia, we really didn't have a whole lot of mail theft. Coming out here on the West Coast, particularly in the Seattle area, there's obviously, as everybody knows, there's quite a lot of it. And this is Inspector Samira Dewey. Sorry.
Good evening, my name is Samira Dewey. I'm also a new inspector as well. Prior to this, I was a financial investigator in the banking industry, and my current assignment right now is mail fraud. So I know a lot of you are mainly here for mail theft, so I promise that my presentation on mail fraud is pretty brief, but it could be important to you as well and your family. So.
The area that I cover, first off, for Seattle Division Headquarters, there are 4 people that work mail theft, and that covers the entire western portion of the state. The part that I am responsible for are the city limits of Seattle, Pierce County, Thurston County, and the entire peninsula. So it's a lot of folks. This past week, I've spent the past week and a half. I've been in Port Townsend because Port Townsend police, through a search warrant, served a search warrant on an individual that was wanted for probation violation for identity theft and stolen mail. Lo and behold, they found 3,000 pieces of stolen mail, and basically you end up having to go in through and organize everything and then spreadsheet and things so you know exactly what's been stolen, and then try and work out financial losses. But anyway, before I get into all that, I just want to kind of give a background of what we are. Most people don't really know what a postal inspector is.
Can people see this okay, or do we need to dim the lights a little? Yeah, can you down a little bit?
Anybody that's seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, that's actually postal inspectors that were chasing after them for all the stagecoach robberies and train robberies that they were doing. So this is one of the oldest federal law enforcement agencies that there is. Initially, back from 1772 to 1801, we were known as a surveyor. Then they got the name special agent. Then they decided to change that. Congress changed it to inspector, and those are the various permutations. 1971, we were one of the first federal law enforcement agencies to hire female agents. And what we do, there are about 1,400 of us nationwide that enforce around 200 federal laws and investigations of crime that adversely affect the mail service and also postal employees as well. My apologies, this is my first time absolutely with PowerPoint. I know that's in Georgia we just didn't use it. There is investigation that we deal with our obviously mail fraud, and that more or less encompasses mortgage scams, sweepstakes scams, things along those lines. Not everything. Revenue fraud, prohibited mailing, such as, believe it or not, there are people that actually will ship drugs through the mail, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, you name it. And of course, people will launder money through the mail, through postal money orders, things along those lines, child exploitation. And then the mail theft, the ID theft thing kind of goes hand in hand. And it also links into bank, credit card fraud, and then external crimes are and violent crimes against employees. Those are external crimes. It's going to be more along the lines of burglaries at post offices and then carriers that are assaulted, things like that. And here's what you know what they're looking for. They're looking for your credit cards that are coming, the convenience checks that the banks send out for your credit card accounts, credit bureau printouts, bank statements, any records, cash and gift cards. They really like those if they run the holidays. Tacoma PD actually, thanks to a watchful citizen back on December 20th, stopped a truck, a U-Haul truck, that had been out in the middle of the night picking up people's parcels that they had left overnight and taking their mail out of the mailbox there. We had about 500 victims from that. And it's all Christmas cards and things like that, and they were taking, as they were rolling along, they had a little assembly line. There was 3 of them in the front seat. And what kind of got the witnesses' attention was, well, it's 3 a.m., there's a U-Haul truck, and it's going from the left side to the right side. Just opening up the mailboxes and just taking whatever in there. And they would hand it to the person in the middle, who would open it up. Hey, there's a check. Great. The check goes over here. There's a gift card. Great. And then the rest would go into a bag, and it was, a lot of it was thrown inside of the card there, inside of the cab. Around tax time, W-2s that come out, that has your Social Security number, tax ID numbers, things along those lines. Passports, you apply for passports, or driver's license or anything. I mean, that's the way it gets to you. It comes in the mail. And obviously it has intrinsic value. Paradoxically, actually, since more transactions are being done on the internet for financial transactions, that bits and pieces of personal identifying information contained in your mail pieces. I mean, you might have noticed in some of your credit card statements that would refer to your account statement as account ending in such and such, where they'll have your Social Security number and just have the last 4. Well, what these folks can do is they pull those little bits of information, they know your address, and they can go on background investigation sites on the internet, and they can pay $50 or $60 per transaction with a stolen credit card or something, and then they can actually pull up through a background investigation website, your social security number, dependents, possibly places where you work, all kinds of other information they can use to fill in the gaps. So then they can go out and open up additional accounts and things along those lines in your name. And a lot of times when you get out when officers get out with someone that's guilty of identity fraud or stuff along those lines, they'll find a notebook with them. These people will have names, birth dates, social security numbers, dependents, how long people have been at certain jobs, and it's all handwritten and in nice order. And they're getting all this through data mining, through the internet. I mean, this guy's so proud of what he did. He even had a tattoo of a mailbox on his neck. So this guy's a true believer. And this is what one of the collection box units looks like after somebody's violently broken into it. These are the guys that are looking really suspicious. That if you see those folks, please call 911. And the basic way to combat it, is going to be target hardening. The secured locking mailboxes, while not foolproof, it does slow them down to the point where perhaps somebody hears some noise, or a dog barking, or something along those lines, so that you can look out the window and observe them, and then get good information to pass along to uniformed officers. There's all kinds of secure locking mailboxes that you can find on the internet. You can Google it, and it'll pull up all types of different types, and also your local hardware store or Home Depot or something along those lines. They've got a whole line of locking mailboxes, and it'll have a little stamp on there that's being approved by the Postmaster General. Another thing you might want to consider is the P.O. box or a private mailbox at a UPS store or some business that has those mailboxes for rent. Because then when you have parcels that come, that's being held by someone behind the counter. Yeah, does anybody notice when you use Amazon.com, you have a billing address, and then you have a shipping address as well? If someone at home, your communities, if there's someone that's retired, someone that is at home during the week where you can perhaps have your parcels shipped to them, where you don't have to have them sitting out on the front porch, somebody can see them and come by and take them. Same thing with the mail. If it's coming during the time that nobody's home, and it's a possibility that perhaps a neighbor could come along and collect it prior to anybody coming along and taking it. And again, the earlier you get it out of the mailbox, the less time is left in there for somebody to take. This particular case in Fort Townsend, where there's 3,000 pieces that have been stolen over a 3-month period, he's getting in the car with his girlfriend, they're going for a ride, and he says, stop. Got his backpack, it's 2:30 in the morning, and he goes out, and he just opens up everybody's mailboxes and stuff that people have been leaving in, and takes it. Another thing that you might want to consider is, in all your neighborhoods, it's mostly individual mailboxes, correct? Okay. The collection box unit is a good idea. They make some very highly securable collection box units. Then there's some other things that you can do with those collection box units. You could perhaps, I know another neighborhood has put in motion sensors, the light activated the motion sensors that activate lights and stuff, things like that let people know, they turn them on at night, that somebody may be looking. It tends to run people off. And then, obviously, anytime you notice anybody suspicious in the neighborhood, get as much information as you can. Obviously, everybody here is networked and interested, and forward that to the police.
Can I add something else, Matt? I know that we don't have the slide here, but regarding outgoing mail, what I used to do is I would leave my mail, out for the mailman to come pick up. So what I do now is I actually go to the post office and drop my mail in, because likely most of the time what you're sending out is usually you're sending out your bill, and you're writing checks for that. So they're looking for outgoing mail as well. So what I would recommend is going to the actual post office and dropping your mail off.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, probably about 30 pieces of outgoing mail were recovered from Port Townsend, and that's what this guy was going around at night. So make sure that you either give it to your carrier or take it to a post office, drop them off. Again, according to the Federal Trade Commission, there's according to them, only 2% of your identity fraud is related to stolen mail. Most of your identity fraud is going to be through data mining, through hackers, taking information through online transactions and things along those lines. Obviously, this is the part that's closest to you. You can actually tell when you got mail pieces stolen. So this is it gets more attention. Pass it to
Okay, so like I said, my assignment is mail fraud. I investigate any crimes in which the mail was used to defraud someone. For example, right now we have, you can go to the next slide. There are 3 different types of schemes or scams that are prevalent right now. One of them is a reshipping scheme, in which someone, for example, I had a case in Renton. I had a subject, she was recruited online. She went to Craigslist looking for a job. She found a work-at-home job, pays, I think, about $200 a week. All she had to do was reship parcels out. So she, yeah. So she sent the person, all they did was communicate through email. She never talked to him on the phone, never saw him in person. Everything was done on email. So he started sending her click and ship labels through her email. She would start receiving packages in the mail through US Mail, FedEx, UPS, and all she had to do was reship them out. So what she was getting was electronics, baby formula, vitamins, and some of the bigger ticket items that she received was environmental testing products from a company. So what we found out from her is that she had shipped out, I don't know, probably about 300 parcels within a 2-month span. And what we did was, I investigated it, found out where she was shipping to. She was shipping to individuals in Texas and California. And so what happens here is criminals, they'll use stolen credit cards and purchase goods online with that stolen credit card information, have it sent to someone, which is the reshipper, so it's harder to trace the origin of where the goods were coming from, were being purchased from. Well, already it's a stolen credit card. So they have the reshipper send it back to someone else, and what they do is they'll sell those goods on eBay. So essentially, what's being sold on, some of the items being sold on eBay was with stolen credit card information. What we did for her is we had her sign an agreement to cease and desist so that she would stop reshipping the goods out with a failure to pay for the items. Another scheme that's going on right now that I'm still working on, a couple of them actually, is the foreign lottery scam. I worked on a case right now in which, and they target the elderly population. They really prey on people's emotional side, you know, our desire to win money. We all want to win money. So I had this one case in Renton where a victim, she had already sent out probably about $80,000 of her own cash out to criminals in Jamaica. So what they did is they would call the victim, tell her she won money, she won $35 million and Mercedes-Benz. All she had to do was pay for processing fee or taxes. And they would promise her every time, no, just send this amount of money, we will send you the winnings. But something always happened. Something like, for example, when I actually went to her house to interview her, she got a call 50 times from one guy insisting to tell her to send the money. And they're very, very persistent, and they're relentless. They won't stop. So what's difficult in this is that she sent it through Western Union, MoneyGram, and the US Mail. And what they also do is they try to tell the victims, don't tell any of your family members. So for this victim, her family members knew, but they pretty much gave up because she kept sending it. And at one point, we actually intercepted $10,000, but I went back to interview her, and she resent $8,000. So what's really difficult is that you can't, and I know a lot of you probably have family members, if you can share this information to them, because a lot of times they tell them not to tell anyone. And I had another victim just recently, she didn't tell anyone until her daughter asked about it, about why was she sending some money out to this person in Jamaica. So if you just try to inquire and educate your family members about this, we can try to prevent people from sending money and becoming a victim. But the difficult thing is that this is a foreign lottery scam that they're doing, and it's in Jamaica, and it's very difficult to prosecute. We actually have a task force out there right now that's working on prosecuting individuals out there. So hopefully we'll get something done, but it's very difficult. So the most that we can do on our end is stopping the victims from sending their money out to these people out there. Another scheme that's kind of similar is the mystery shopper scam, in which people are also recruited. A lot of it is recruited online, but where we have our mail nexus is that they'll send checks through the mail, or they'll send their money through the mail. So with the mystery shopper scam is, say someone applies for a job online to be a mystery shopper. So the criminals, they'll send you a check and instructions, for example, to go rate the customer service at Walmart, rate the customer service at Western Union or MoneyGram. They'll send you a check for $1,800. Then they tell you to go deposit the check at your bank, and then keep maybe $200 for yourself, but send the rest through MoneyGram or Western Union to the criminals in whatever other country that they're in. So this is another scheme. So the thing that to remember with these kinds of schemes is, ask yourself, is it too good to be true? Why are you getting this money? Why are they asking you to do this? Just remember, if it sounds like it's something that you should be skeptical. Ask, why are these people contacting me? Most likely it's a scam. So, like I said, remember that just be skeptical. Is it too good to be true? It usually is. Don't enter foreign lotteries. These are illegal. Educate your family about what you know, because sometimes they might be a victim of it and you don't know. And lastly, just notify the Postal Inspection Service, where you can file a complaint online, and we also have a telephone number. And here's our contact information. I have it on the board already. This is our toll-free number. This is where you can call to make a complaint, to file a complaint over the telephone. And this is our website, in which you can file a complaint online.
I think there were some questions that I was going to kind of bring up filing standards as far as prosecution. So the U.S. Attorney's Office, for us to file a case federally, we have to have at least $20,000 in financial losses related to a specific mail theft perpetrator. And it's a lot of work building up those particular numbers, particularly when you have a wide geographic area that you're dealing with, and individual complaints come in. You've got to be able to put all that information together to be able to reach the threshold. So if we can't reach the $20,000 threshold, a lot of times we'll end up prosecuting it on the state side. But there still are state filing guidelines as well that differ in each county. I believe King is $5,000. Does that sound sure? I think King County is around $5,000 in losses. Pierce County is they're a little more open, because they don't as far as they don't have the volume that King does. So what you want to do when you're reporting your mail theft, contact your local police. And then if you go to USPS.com or our website, either way there's links to it. There's online mail theft reports, okay? And when you fill those out, all the information that you enter gets delivered to me once a week on a spreadsheet. And that way, if there are traceable losses, I will try and get in touch with you. If you don't have access to the internet, you can go by your local post office and ask for a mail theft complaint form, and then they will package it up and send it to them.
I have a question. If a retail package is delivered to an unattended house, so nobody signs for it, and then it disappears, who's responsible? I mean, the retailer are they required to replace that item because
That's going to
they
be,
dropped it off
right,
at a house without?
the retailer,
Yeah,
that's going to be an agreement that, I'm sure there's fine print when you enter into the agreement to have it shipped to the house.
I think
Between
what
you
she
and
means, the
retail.
post office delivered it to the wrong house.
no, I don't mean the wrong house. I mean, the post office leaves it on somebody, or UPS or
Mhm.
FedEx, leaves it somewhere without handing it to a person,
Well,
and it gets stolen.
right.
Whose responsibility is that?
Well, the post office responsibility to deliver it to the address.
They're not required to hand it to a person or collect
It depends on what type of delivery
Yeah.
that you specify.
Right.
But there's also, USPS.com has all of the, there's complaint lines and information, regarding that. You will-
Yeah, during the holiday season, we had a gift at our house, but we were expecting it that day. When we came back, it was in our back porch, in our back door. Is that common?
That's a good area.
Yeah, that's probably what that is. Yeah, I haven't heard anything. That's the first I've heard of that.
Along the same lines as that, our mail carrier, as a courtesy to us in our neighborhood, knocks on our doors when we deliver a package, whether, whatever type of service. But then he's not the regular person, but once in a while we have other people and they don't. And for instance, a package is stolen when the person is home, middle of the day. Our phone should comes quite close to the middle of the day. The person was home and was taken off and he didn't know the package was there, and
Right.
hadn't gotten it off. And our mail carrier said it wasn't standard procedure. Why couldn't it be, as a suggestion to the post office?
I honestly don't know. I didn't come from the postal service side. I came from the law enforcement side. But I mean, these are suggestions, that can certainly be brought up via portals on the USPS.com website. And sometimes when they have a lot of parcels to deliver, they'll send one person out to just make parcel runs because it ends up slowing down the regular postal carriers. So, and that could have been what happened at that point in time. But, yes.
I live in a condo that is on 2 streets, and we wanted to move the mailbox for the whole community to other street. So it's really a change of address.
Okay.
How do you figure that out?
You can call the postmaster or go by and talk to the postmaster, whatever post office services your area. They're the ones that they can start that process for you and let you know exactly how it would read as far as what the address would be and give you the okay to move those boxes.
So I actually talked with the people down at Westwood Village. And one of the criteria is that they don't want to increase the number of steps that the deliverer takes. That's the general rule. So if you have your mailbox on your actual on the wall of your house, and you want to put a locking mailbox out on the street, that's something that they would certainly consider. But in general, and I'm sure that there are stipulations as to ways that they would go around this, but in general, if you're going to move a mailbox from closer to the street to closer to your home, which means that they're going to have to go farther or go deeper onto your property, they're far less likely to allow that.
Are you finding, so I saw the 2% of fraud for mail. Are you finding the dollar value that's being stolen is low and maybe that's where the attention isn't giving? Because I'm finding that you have a huge area, and is the mailbox just something that's from the past? And we should just focus on something that's more sturdy? I'm not sure a forward direction, and maybe we should be.
Well, we have, good news is we actually do have 4 more people.
Yeah.
We actually have 4 more people coming out to the Seattle division. 4 more people that have been hired So I'm hoping that they will give someone, one person, at least one person, the Seattle city limits. Because it really is, it's a lot.
Well, I was actually assigned to Seattle, but with Officer, when I got in contact with Officer Keene, but then I got moved to mail fraud, and then it moved to Matt, which is his area is already huge. So Seattle by itself, it's yeah.
At least 2 people. But I mean, again, you're dealing with finances and economics.
And you're from Atlanta, so it seems like it's more regionally based.
Well, yeah, I originally was from Atlanta, right? But as far as what areas of the country are experiencing high volumes of mail theft, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, dollar, it seems like dollar is really what's important for the government.
Losses, right.
I mean, one of the things I think, one of the things I think is important to note is that it's not the dollar amount from the victim, it's the dollar amount that we can tie into the person. And so if we're doing what we've been talking about, and you as a block have catch this guy, and he's gone down your block, and we catch him, and he's got 70 people's mail. Excuse me. And then we can go back and we can figure out that he's actually defrauded a lot of people in the past. It's not just what he's done today. It's how much mail theft, and it's
an aggregate.
Aggregated, exactly. That's what I was looking for.
This mail thing was part of the problem that we had in our neighborhood several months ago, and then they forced people to move out, but apparently they're moving back in again. And one of the things that they did was they found, from what I understand, a whole giant pile of mail, but they couldn't pin it on any particular person.
Right.
So they didn't do anything. Nobody was arrested. It was just like, well, all these people have, there's 3,000 pieces of mail here, but so, I mean, I don't understand why mail is under arrested, because, anybody that's in the house, why weren't they all arrested? They were in possession of stolen property.
I don't really know, ma'am. I can't speak to that. I don't know the exact specifics of it there. You need to be able to show that someone had knowledge, dominion, and control over those particular items.
I don't know how you could miss 3,000 pieces of mail. That boggles my mind. And this is a huge amount of money, $5,000. I mean, even if you lost only $500 yourself,
right.
You would have to have, at least 10 other people lose $500 too. You wouldn't even do anything about it.
Unfortunately, that's the way the prosecutor's office is going to utilize their limited resources. They don't have enough prosecutors or enough judges or enough court time to prosecute.
But I don't see how that makes anybody not. They know the limits are.
I understand.
Go and get that much.
I
Stop for a while. You want to stop anybody from stealing mail?
It's very frustrating. Because every week, I'm getting between 25 and 75 individual reports from USPS.com. And it's far much, it's much more than one person can handle. So, yeah, I see what you mean. It's just very frustrating. Yes, ma'am.
I have a situation where the regular mail carrier is great, but if there's a unique mail carrier, and I have a lot of mailbox, I'll be a chintzy one, not a good one, but I'm trying to get a good one. The unique mail carrier will stuff those newspaper advertisements, all the junk mail through that little slot, where I have a box underneath it that says oversized mail. And they'll just kind of leave the lid up, they'll stuff the mail in there, and they'll take off. And then I find the mail out with the lid open, with the lid up, rather than taking the time to see what's on the bottom. And I complain. I got my regular mail carrier to finally do it correctly, but it's the leaf mail carriers. Is there anything that can be done about that?
Outside of notifying the local supervisors there at that individual post office, and again, there's various levels of supervision that you can report those complaints up to. You can either, again, go in person to the post office there, but there's also information and numbers, emails that you can send out via USPS.com that will hit the appropriate supervisor.
Isn't there any kind of training when these postal, when they go out and they get trained on how to put mail in a box?
I don't know, ma'am. I didn't come from I was never a letter carrier or anything. I was just a cop.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes, ma'am.
This is something sort of lower level mail theft and possession and stolen mail. Sort of you were referring to, obviously, it's huge. The King County Prosecutor's Office just added a couple of crime codes for possession of stolen mail, theft of mail, obviously. All you have to have is 3 different addresses, 10 different pieces of mail that do not belong to you. But you have to prove that they have dominion and control over that bag, over that mail, what have you. But don't lose hope just because you know, if it's a smaller but you can't prove a dollar value, still report it because the King County Prosecutor's Office is strapped for money, yes.
Sure.
But we'll charge those.
And as a result of that, and what the governor signed, pushed up, is a felony by now state law.
Right. Class C felony?
Class C, yeah.
Yeah, because they just passed, Washington just passed that law back here. It went into effect in June or July, is that right?
So now the counties are taking that state law and incorporating it into the
Right.
Constitution.
So is this a different reporting process to get it? Okay.
Different laws.
Okay, so we're still just told to contact the police and report it, but then it might go to you then?
Yeah, just don't get disheartened if you say, oh, I haven't lost $5,000
Yeah.
worth, it's not worth it. It is worth
Report it, for sure, because then everything can get aggregated as investigations go on. Yes, sir.
How bad is mail theft in Seattle? Number 2, is there any theories as to why it is the way it is? And number 3, why doesn't the Postal Service, if it is so bad in this area, why don't they do across the board notification of all takers of the Postal Service? A notification that this is the state of affairs in Seattle.
I honestly, I didn't pull any statistics before I came. I don't think we have the ability to pull statistics of lost areas versus standard delivery areas. What was the last part of your question?
Why hasn't there been just a across the board notification to everybody, all people who receive mail that it's this bad in Seattle? I never knew it until recently, and then it seems like it's just unbelievable.
Right. When I get either volume mail theft reports for a collection box or something that's been broken into, or an area along a clear where it's a narrow neighborhood, for example, Fellow Street, I'll send out what's known as a 2016 form, and it lists that mail theft has been recorded or reported in your area. I don't know whether we have the resources to send out a mass mailing to individuals in areas that haven't been reported to us.
Well, it's just, just generally to tell people that they should all have locked mailboxes. The Seattle has a mail theft problem that's unique to this area,
right.
Whatever. But we haven't received anything that's on our street. And it's been going on since last
to tell each other.
Yeah. We haven't received anything.
And you guys are on the Fellow Street?
Yeah, and telling each other what's going on. Our carrier,
What's that?
I got her talking to by my mail carrier for advising my neighbors.
No, our
I have
carrier
blocked
told
off.
everybody in the neighborhood.
I'll have to confiscate it next time. Told those get me around here.
Is there a process where we can get an active postmaster to come to one of these meetings? Because when we ask you questions, you're obviously the enforcement side. I've had varying locks with the Postal Service, postmasters at local stations, and really don't want to deal with the public. But they have to.
Why don't they stand for us?
So,
Could you suggest that?
I've heard different things.
I'll do that.
Okay.
No, I don't usually don't often get a response, but sometimes I do, and no action occurs after. I just assume it'd be probably a lot to do already.
True, but
It'd be nice to get somebody here that
Right.
can hear this.
okay. I mean, I can forward that to our public information officer, and it's possibly.
That would be great.
Because maybe they're not aware of the neighbors. I mean, each postmaster for each area has obviously got quite a bit to do. And they might not see the bigger picture, they're still working with their area.
Sure. Well, I'll see the public information officer tomorrow, and I'll let them know that you guys are interested in perhaps talking to somebody.
We can learn a lot from them probably about how to do stuff.
What's that?
We can learn from them like how to do this mailbox stuff. And
Right. Yeah, because it's really, they're the ones that set the guidelines, or they're the ones that get the guidelines and know how to relay those to other, to postal customers.
You might say that most of us are trying to keep them in business.
Yeah.
Literally.
I understand.
I'm serious about that.
Yes, sir.
Now, one of the approaches that we took down south, actually, my catchment area is area in precinct 4, where I live, but my postal service is westward. So in our area of the world, we kind of have overlapping jurisdictions on. That's kind of what brings me up here, because we've had reports from Alki to Browns Point, which is about 40 miles south, of mail theft to include the blue boxes being dragged away from the post offices. So you've shown very well the example of a community mailbox being ripped. I mean, they're ripping them off from the stand. They're not just ripping the boxes, they're taking the whole one thing. Those boxes cost approximately $1,650 for 18 individual boxes. If you go to the post office, they'll tell you that you got to get those 18 people if you want one of those community boxes. And get them together, get signatures, give them the petition, and then it's about $125 per person. About $1,650 if you go to mailboxguy.com, which they recommended. Go to that vendor, it's about $1,650, and then about $125 for the installation to set that up. We're setting up one in my street on the Blackwatch County, and it's going to cost us an additional $500 to put a trap light on it, because in order to film it from a distance, to get something good that they need, to get a license plate or enough to ID the individual or the vehicle, and not inhibit traffic. You don't want to flash something in somebody's eye. So it's just not putting up a camera on a street or without just putting up a camera. I mean, you got to be very mindful of all this. And then the cost. So when you get down to it, it's about $140 compared to if you go to Home Depot and get your own individual lockbox, it's about $120. But you don't have the camera and you don't have any other protection. We look at it this way. If you don't have a locked mailbox, you're wrong. That's a broken window, number one. Number two, there is no safe mail delivery unless you take your mail to the post office and you pick your mail up from the post office. Anything less than that is less secure. But we found that if our neighborhood can get individual lockboxes or a community lockbox, we'll be doing our part in helping to prevent this crime.
That's a great
and
idea.
then keeping our eye on doing what everything John said. Thank you, John, for coming down south. We won't pay you, but thanks. But the postmaster's been very, very helpful in this area. But we've actually had reports, because I get the district reports. I get kind of the whole enchilada from Seattle to Tacoma. And it's an epidemic, there's no doubt. The mail that you discovered from Port Townsend, you could discover in Burien last week, I think. It's a pandemic.
Yeah, the Tacoma case on December 20th started in Burien.
Yeah, I mean, it's just pandemic, and they call them rippers, I guess, now that we see them ripping post office boxes or mail. But we've taken that kind of attitude like we did when we originally had crime about 20, 30 years ago before people were really invented into our neighborhood. That we all have to take that part and treat it as a broken window, because Most of us have taken our personal identifying information and done it online, and we pay our bills online, but you still get that stuff in your mailbox that can be scanned, can be taken for identity theft. So even if I have all of our stuff, and most of us do in our neighborhood, all of our really important stuff, you still get packages, you still get this, you still get that from Christmas and so on. But without having a secure post office box in the post office, and taking your mail, that's your post office box in front of you, taking it to the post office. It's really the only recommendation right now until we can get a handle on this crime that we can do to be 100% safe, because I wouldn't tell my neighbors, hey, just get lockbox, you'll be okay. That's wrong. That leads them to a false sense of security, or even getting a community lockbox. And my neighbors can afford about 150 bucks, but there's some of my neighbors just outside of my blockbox that probably couldn't. So our recommendation to them is, for the time being, just treat it as a crime that's going to happen. You let it happen. If you put it out there, they're going to get it. Right. There's really nothing to do to stop it. Preventing it, maybe yes, but never stop it.
But I think that part of what we're trying to do here is, with the block watches, is what can we do as a block watch? Like the neighborhood who, they identified they were having mail taken, and it still keeps being taken. And they communicated with each other, which helped, and they knew it was happening. But what else could they have done to help it stop in their neighborhood? As a block watch, it's very active. They know what's going on, so they're not lying, and what else can they do?
Outside of, is there someone home during the day that can go and collect that mail before it has a chance to be stolen?
What can they do to help convict the person that's stealing it?
They're help us catch them. I mean, that's the big piece. Is all the things we've talked about. It's not one of those things is the answer. All of those things are the answer. And so knowing your neighbors, knowing who should be out and about, taking the mail out of your mailbox, checking your credit once a year, making sure nobody's goofing with your credit. Check your bank information weekly if you can. I mean, keep up on top of that. Know where your money is. If your money starts disappearing and you tell your bank, my money's disappearing, then they're going to pay attention to it. And so catching it early. No, first thing is catching them when they're doing it. If we can do that, great. Second is catch that they've done it. If they're trying to steal your identity, if they're trying to steal your information, you've got to catch it early, or you're just going to, if you're not proactive in being part of the solution here, then you're just going to continue to be a victim in what's going on. So it's like what I said before. Your district officer is able to. There are certain areas that we focus on just because those are areas we are constantly called. But for the general neighborhood, you guys know a lot better than we do what looks wrong. And to be willing to call it in and say, that's not my neighbor going into my neighbor's mailbox, is a perfectly good reason to call 911. Try to give us the best description and last known direction. Try to give us what you can. And the key is, we're not going to catch them every time. But we're going to catch them once. And then we're going to catch them again. And then we're going to catch them again. But if we're not communicating, we're never going to catch them. So
there's also some really good identity fraud information on a website that's written inside of some of those pamphlets we brought. It's ftc.gov/ID theft. I mean, it has some really good quality information as far as how often you need to be checking things and what to do in case that you are victimized.
I just wanted to segue on that gentleman's comment. So we actually came here, we are representatives of the National Mailbox Manufacturer, so we brought information on mailboxes, locking mailboxes, filling, that we actually provide in the Seattle area across the nation. So if you do have questions or your neighborhood is interested about all the information on locking mailboxes, that you could possibly need one. So we're just here to answer any questions on those, so you can see what's available and actually protect your mail from that. they drive.
Yeah, outside of Christmas, a couple things. Outside of Christmas, is there statistically a time of year where we see increased mail theft? And then on what the officer was talking about, helping you guys catch them, helping everybody catch them. What is needed to catch them? So if we have the license plate and it is called in, do you physically have to pull the car over and see them that day at that time to get them caught? Or with enough information, is it ever followed up on in the future? So if I got the license plate description and people, which did happen, is that something that you go forward with? Because I never heard back, and I figured I'd maybe get a call. Is this the person? Is that the person?
Yeah, that is up to a prosecutor. The police department doesn't decide who gets charged. We go to an incident, we gather as much information as we can, we look at the way the law is written, and we determine if that law has been broken, and then the bottom of each of these laws says, if this happened, then this happens. And that's how we deal with the actual crime. So once it gets to whether the person goes to jail or not, we send that information and request those charges as we read the letter of the law, and that goes to the prosecuting attorney, whether it be King County or the City of Seattle. Then that attorney is then going to interpret what they read in our report, and they're the ones that are going to determine if the elements of that crime exist and if they have the resources to then prosecute that. So aggregation of the mail theft is certainly something that gets done. It's a matter of being able to say, in this instance, we're solid enough that we're going to go ahead and prosecute on that instance, and then we're also solid enough because the person was actually caught 2 weeks later, and then the prosecutor is going to put those together. That's not something that I decide to do. If I'm continuously working on a particular area, then I might have multiple case numbers, and I might send those all to the prosecutor at the same time. So it looks like it's all one thing, but they're all decidedly different. So.
I'm in Arbor Heights, and I guess our area, maybe it's similar to a lot of other people's areas, but for a person stealing our mail, they only have to go a couple blocks to be into another jurisdiction as far as police go. So the chance of you guys actually catching them in the act is slim. So that's why I was wondering if there's follow-up just based on a citizen's report with license plate and descriptions, if that's ever taken further, or if it's just that an officer needs to catch them, not necessarily in the act, because it could be a few blocks away, but actually catch them that day or within a certain amount of time.
So it's one of the things that came up is that the investigation isn't just the theft of the mail out of the mailbox. It's also all those other things that are going on. So if you have been the victim of the theft, you're possibly going to be the victim of fraud at a later date. So it's combining all of those things. I mean, it's not. I'm not quite understanding what your question is, but
you're not going to be the only one. All detectives, all the area agencies, and Secret Service, we all communicate via something known as the FIT list. We communicate. We're shooting out pictures of people that have been photos taken of them while they're passing stolen checks or while they're using stolen credit cards. Everybody's in communication with everybody. It's actually a really, really good system. So as far as a jurisdictional issue, the way Washington law is written, if you have someone that's committed theft, fraud, where you got $3,000 here, and they committed $2,000 in Pierce County, they can actually aggregate, and then you can decide which jurisdiction you want to proceed with charges. So, to answer your question, we do work outside of jurisdictional boundaries.
So there's one more thing about if you actually have a license plate and a good description, and then 2 days later we get a mediocre description, but it's pretty similar, but they didn't get a license plate. officers that are working in that area pay attention to that kind of thing. So,
That was more what I was wondering, if, because I know you guys deal with just tons of information and tons of calls on a daily, weekly basis. So I was wondering if that license plate number comes in and then just kind of gets lost down the road, or if that is maintained in some sort of database that's shared. Like you had just said, you guys do share information back and forth, but does that stay somewhere? Can police officers access that information to know this area has had this vehicle for at least a few months afterwards, or does it kind of just go into cyberspace?
The information is there. The question is how it's gonna keep reoccurring on that officer's computer. So if you are the victim of a mail theft and you've got that plate, if I run you, then I'm going to see that call.
Okay.
I can run you, I can run your address, I can run that vehicle, and so something will have required, so say 2 months later, that plate is probably not fresh in that officer's head. But if he then runs that plate, because for a normal traffic stop, then he's going to see that was a suspect vehicle in a...
It'll show that.
It will show,
okay. Yeah, that answers.
But just for the city of Seattle.
Right.
So you are right about stepping over that county line. But another piece to that is this happens there too. So when we start getting these issues like this, then we start talking with county. And as departments, I don't know how well we communicate, but when I have an issue and I think it's spreading to county, I've got people in county that I call. And so we, boots on the ground, we talk pretty well.
I'm sure you kind of know. You respond to calls kind of at the same time with King County. Yes.
Yeah. We know why this is happening. Someone asked it earlier. I don't know that it was answered. Why is mail theft such an issue here?
Because it works. Because they're getting your mail. I mean, because people aren't paying attention to their finances. Because they're,
I've lived in other parts of the country, and I have friends in other parts of the country, and I never hear about this issue there. It is curious to me why it's so huge here.
Most of the perpetrators I've dealt with they're hooked on meth or something along those lines, meth and heroin, they're addicts. And then to a far lesser degree, there are some organized ID theft rings that exist that send out people to break in mailbox and agglomerate information and use it for whatever purposes.
I have another question too. It seems like at one of the other meetings, we kind of discussed some sort of grant funding for neighborhoods to be able to purchase these. Is there any information on that, or can somebody come in and speak to that issue maybe?
Yeah.
Actually, that segues into one of the announcements that I've written on the board is that there's an upcoming grant deadline on the 4th of March, and that's actually for one of the technology fund grants, which doesn't really fall into this category. But there's also other types of grants, the small and simple grants that you can apply for twice a year, and there are small Sparks grants that you can apply for at any time. Those are on the Seattle.gov website under NMF, Neighborhood Matching Funds. And if you Google it, you can find it. But especially for a neighborhood that wanted to pull together and do something, and the neighborhood was kind of, where they really had a vision for what they wanted to do, they could probably write a grant application and have a good chance of getting it funded.
But that's a good question. I will try and follow up and just ask one of the neighborhood matching grant people if it's been done before. And if not, is it possible that if a neighborhood wanted to, I don't know about the guy, I think he might have left, that was talking about the going together with those expensive big boxes. I don't know about that. But even if everybody just had locking mailboxes in a neighborhood that had been hit hard with mail theft, because, and part of that will be our job in educating when we see mailboxes that are just right out next to the street that you know, you wouldn't even have to get out of your car, you could just, you know. So, but the neighborhood as a group can't all afford to have that done. So yeah, it's a good question. I'll ask them and see if I can get some background information on that. But I think Karen's right that most of the neighborhood matching grants, if you have a good case for your neighborhood, part of it's just, is your neighborhood working together to accomplish something? And this would certainly be something that you'd be wanting to accomplish. So I personally would think it would have a very good chance, but I'll check into it for sure. Yeah.
As far as anybody looking for a quick fix, what's worked for our block, our theft has almost completely ceased.
Yeah.
We get car prowls almost every weekend, and we've had major stuff happen. My husband calls me the neighborhood witch. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I am on your butt and in your butt and you're on my block. I know people on there, what you're doing. My house is from the 20s. I'm 99% windows. I see you from one end to the other end. I make my presence known when the mailman comes. I'm outside for about 45 minutes just putting around in the yard, watching to see who's on my block. And the mailman, when he comes by, kind of gives me a look like, okay, I'm here. I watch people. If someone gets a package from somewhere, I'll call them up at work, hey, you got this, are you coming home at 9 tonight? I'll take it in my house right now, come get me tomorrow. And I actually saw someone on my block when I came home from lunch one day. It was noon, I knew everybody was going to work, no one was home. And he kind of just struck my eyes, so my mom was in the car with me, and I said, Mom, that guy has not been on our block before. And she goes, oh, just let it go. I said, no, he has not been on our block before. And he was standing at the driveway of his neighbor's house, and he had his hand like this, and he was writing something. And I go, just look at the way the guy's standing, it's not right. And so I immediately walked straight across the street right up to him and said, hey, how's it going, buddy? And he turned and looked at me and started to run. Well, he had a notepad that he stuck in his pocket, and my mom goes, what are you doing? Get back here. So I took off after him, and I'm on the phone with the police saying, this guy's running for me, he's writing something down. Well, sure enough, he was faster than me. But the police caught him a couple blocks away, and he had a pad of addresses, what time of day he came by, there was no one home. And he just had all these addresses written down, and it turned out he was from like Renton or, you know, somewhere way far away, and he just had all these random blocks of all these addresses that no one was home. And so, I mean, as far as just a quick fix, my neighbors will call me and tell me, hey, you know, FedEx said they just dropped something off with the confirmation, can you go get it? I'll go get it and bring it home. Or, you know, I'm expecting a check today, can you go get it? You know, because I'm home, so if you guys can find somebody on your block that's willing to do that. Have somebody that attacks people when they come on your block. Just as simple, if I see someone walking by, I'm like, hey, how's it going? So they know you saw them and you could give a description of who it was. And you know, some people scares them, they're like, oh, hey, how's it going? I don't care, you're on my block.
And part of it is just, you know, if you're making people aware that if they're on this block, people are communicating with each other and looking at you, saying hello. John says to say that all the time, and maybe they'll go, and you have locked mailboxes. Anything you can do to just make it less likely that they're going to feed on that particular neighborhood.
So I think there's two main things that kind of came up in your story and how that came about. We can make it more difficult for them to steal your mail. And we can make it more likely that they're going to be seen, or at least that they think they're going to be seen, stealing your mail. So those are the two. It's basic step 10. It all comes back to it every single time. So you got natural surveillance, and you've got that target hardening. And we can get a little lock on our mailbox that's a little flimsy thing, and that's better than not. We can get Fort Knox on our front stoop, and better or not, that's another way of handling it. So you have to decide how you, as the person who has control over your destiny and your belongings, where you want to go with this. So you certainly can leave a mailbox with no lock on the sidewalk, where right behind some big hedges that you can't see, and the likelihood of becoming a victim is going to be greater for you. Or you can take some steps, and none of these steps are foolproof. None of these steps by themselves are the answer. You have to decide how you want to interact with your environment, and how you want to take control over
what you have control over, and to be able to then affect your environment and affect your neighbor's environment as well. I mean, you being able to see the street and being the person that says, hey, how's it going, is going to be, a big, make a big change to the likelihood of you or your neighbors becoming victims. So it's a matter of working together. It's a matter of using everything that we know and everything that everybody else knows that we can tie into in order to try to protect ourselves and protect our property.
Richard, did you have?
I just wanted to thank these two for coming tonight.
Absolutely.
I think you worked a long day, and you took the time tonight to come, and it's a privilege to have you speak to us. And so I appreciate you listening to our neighborhood block watch concerns and trying to help out anyway.
Thank you.